Hello, and welcome to The Perch. This is a brand new podcast from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. We've been excited about this project for a while now and glad that we're able to launch it today. This is the first episode of what will be weekly episodes featuring local news and conversations between our reporters about what's going on in the community, as well as deep dives into some of the stuff that we are looking into here and learning about. For this week's first episode, that conversation will be centered around housing through the lens of the work that Habitat for Humanity is doing in Laramie County. We took the microphone out to a construction site and spoke with some of the people working on the homes there and people that will be living in the homes, as well as some people behind the Habitat for Humanity program and the work that they're doing to address the national housing crisis on a local level. So before we get into that, we're going to get a quick roundup of what's going on in the news in the community. As this is the inaugural episode of The Perch, we'll go around and introduce some of the folks here that'll be joining this podcast every week and sharing what they're working on. So I'll start. My name's Noah Zahn. I'm the local government and business reporter here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, and I'll be hosting the podcast every week. And here's Ivy.
My name's Ivy Seacrest. I am our crime and public safety reporter, and I will be telling you about what's going on with our local law enforcement every week.
My name is Hannah Shields, and I'm our state government and education reporter, so I'll be keeping you up to date on all things education and state-level news.
My name is Taylor Staples. I'm the new arts and entertainment reporter / features reporter, and I'll be bringing the fun stuff every week.
So let's start with Ivy. What's been going on in your world?
Yeah, so the biggest thing to pay attention to with the Cheyenne local law enforcement beat is the coin shop murders in 2015. So in 2015, during the pancake breakfast on July 20th, during Cheyenne Frontier Days, a local law enforcement received a call from Douglas Smith. Via 911, he told them that a robbery was happening in progress at the coin shop and that George Manley, nicknamed Doc, had been shot. When police arrived on the scene, they realized that also Dwight Brockman, the owner of the store, had also been shot. Both were dead upon arrival. And it's been since 2015 that the police department has been collaborating with other groups to kind of find a suspect. And last month, on June 25th, they arrested Smith, the original 911 caller, for this case. And then Smith was expedited to Cheyenne and is currently in police custody and facing hearings and potentially a trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder.
What's next in this process?
So what's next in this process is that Smith will be facing his arraignment hearing, which is kind of the beginning of the criminal process, the criminal charging process. Also, what's next is seeing kind of how well the district attorney's office case stands up. Currently, Assistant District Attorney William Edelman is leading this case. I know that Sylvia Hackle, our district attorney, has said that she has full confidence in him. A lot of the evidence and the reason that it's taken this long to kind of get an arrest is because their main evidence against Smith is that a lot of the series of events that he relayed to the police initially have been disproven. So, for example, he told police that he called Brockman at 9:22 on the morning of the shootings to see if the store is open. Phone records show that Brockman was actually on the phone with someone else at that time. He said that he saw a 5'3" to 5'4" tall Hispanic man leaving the scene. No video footage shows anyone matching that description leaving the scene. Other witnesses say that they never saw Smith leaving the scene either. So a lot of what he's told police has been not true necessarily. It hasn't been corroborated by the evidence they have. But they don't have the gun. They don't have a motive from Smith, and Smith's attorney's main defense is that a lot of this is circumstantial. So what's really to pay attention to here is how well this case stands up, and will this be enough evidence to convict?
And so where's Smith been since 2015, and how did they, make the decision to arrest him now?
So he's been a bit all over. He's actually a Canadian citizen, and he was here legally in 2015, but he's not here legally currently. He returned to Canada for 2 years, and then he came back, and he was arrested in California. So I can't say for sure what the final trigger to arrest him was, but basically this buildup of evidence and interviews that happened in May of 2023 really kind of solidified their case against Smith to arrest him. And he's been cooperative with the police the entire time. He's stayed in touch, updated his address. They've been able to continue interviewing him, so they've maintained contact, and that, I think, contributed to the ability to arrest him at this point.
And so do you have any idea of what kind of sentence he'll be looking at?
I can't say what kind of sentence he'll be looking at. I do know upon my last conversation with District Attorney Sylvia Hackle that they do not intend to seek the death penalty, which is the highest penalty that he could receive for two accounts of first-degree murder. But it's hard to say what he will ultimately end up facing. He is a 68-year-old man, so even if they give him 25 years, that's kind of a life sentence for him at that point.
Thanks, Ivy. Now let's check in with our state government reporter, Hannah Shields. What's going on with you?
So the big story that I'm following up on this week is the lawsuit on Wyoming's ban of Delta 8, which just went into effect July 1st, and some of the voices that are actually in favor of this ban.
So how did this ban come about? What is it?
So the ban on Delta 8 originally started with conversations after a few teens in Cody, Wyoming, consumed some Delta 8 products and ended up in the hospital. And that stirred up a lot of concern over this product, started conversations at the state level, which eventually led to the making and pass of Senate File 32 hemp limitations on psychoactive substances, which was signed into law this year by Governor Gordon. And what this bill does is that it prohibits the addition of synthetic substances or other additives to hemp and hemp products. This bill also applies to psychoactive analogs and isomers of THC, listing Delta 8 THC as a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act, ultimately banning all Delta 8 products in Wyoming.
And so before we get too into the weeds of it, not to use a pun, but can you sort of explain what Delta 8 is and how it might be different from what people normally think of as marijuana?
Yeah, so Delta 8 is a cannabinoid that occurs naturally in the hemp plant. So the 2018 Farm Bill defines the hemp plant as basically anything containing up to 0.3% Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis. So Delta 9 is the cannabinoid that basically over 0.3% of which is classified as marijuana, and that's what gets people high. So Delta 8, on the other hand, it does occur in very small doses naturally in the hemp plant. What the hemp industry has done is extracted Delta 8 cannabinoids and through a chemical making process created these Delta 8 products, which when consumed creates a high quite similar to marijuana.
And so the hemp industry is suing the state now over this ruling. And so can you tell me a bit about that and why they're doing that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of hemp stores in Wyoming that began selling Delta 8 products. It became a very popular product in Wyoming because it was perceived as this loophole to getting high without actually consuming marijuana, which of course is still illegal in the state of Wyoming, both recreationally and medically. A lot of these hemp stores in the lawsuit are claiming that under this Delta 8 ban, it's going to force them to lay off a lot of their employees or close their stores. Looking through the lawsuit file, which was first obtained by WyoFile in their article, I think a really notable quote there is that they say the ban will turn farmers, business owners, and consumers, including the plaintiffs, into criminals overnight. So they also claim that the statute will cause irreparable financial harm, forcing many of these hemp stores to either close or lay off their employees. So the other part of that lawsuit, outside of the financial harm that it's going to cause to these hemp stores, is that they say this is also a violation of the 2018 Farm Bill Act, which only mentions the only mentions the Delta 9 THC. It does not mention Delta 8, doesn't mention Delta 10 cannabinoids. So that's kind of where they get that perceived loophole. They also pull a quote from that bill saying that states cannot modify the definition of hemp under this act.
And so are all of the stores in the Wyoming hemp industry pretty uniform in their voice against this legislation?
Yeah, so there actually is one hemp store here in Cheyenne called Natural Wellness, owned by Rochelle Tabor and her husband. Rochelle reached out to me last week telling me, she's been seeing all the reports in the news about the Delta 8 ban, and that it seems like almost every hemp store in Wyoming is is against it. But she, however, is actually in favor of the ban. She's originally from Colorado, and all of the products in her store are natural hemp products, including oils, tinctures, gummies, things like that. However, she is worried about the dangerous side effects of the Delta 8 products, and she doesn't want her potential customers to be scared off from all hemp products after consuming Delta 8. It does kind of create this gray area of what is hemp, what is Delta 8. We have a lot of older people in this city, in this state, who use hemp to treat arthritis, or, it's been also used to treat depression or anxiety, but understanding the differences and the effects of consuming these things is still not as known. So one thing that Rochelle told me is that some of her customers would walk into the store claiming that they had consumed a Delta 8 product without realizing it would make them high, and now they're very wary of all hemp products, and she doesn't kind of want that reputation being built up for all hemp stores. So she's adamantly against Delta 8. I mean, even side note, Rochelle told me she was even in favor of legalizing marijuana here in Wyoming. It's just the Delta 8 product, because it's synthetically made, she's just, a bit worried about some of the side effects.
And so this legislation in Wyoming, is that a similar conversation around the country?
Yeah, so this is definitely happening in states around the country. Our close neighboring state, Colorado, had also just recently passed its own bill in 2023 that basically bans the sale of Delta 8 products in that state. So in 2023, the Colorado General Assembly passed Senate Bill 23-271, and it does a few things. The bill expands the state's definition of THC to include Delta 8 in its natural occurring form, and it also revised the state's hemp definition to include a limit total of THC in a hemp product and a required ratio of CBD to THC for approved hemp products sold in the state. So they kind of really break it down. The bill was a result of a final report produced by a task force that met 21 times the year before in 2022. And so this is kind of some of the task force's recommendations that were incorporated into that bill. Currently, there are 3 classes of hemp cannabinoids under Colorado statute that range from non-intoxicating to potentially intoxicating to intoxicating. And in the intoxicating cannabinoid class, there's Delta 9 THC, which is what we typically think of when we think of marijuana, as well as the synthetic forms of THC, including Delta 8. So what the bill does is that it basically gave the state's marijuana enforcement division to regulate some of these synthetic cannabinoids where the sales of Delta 8 are strictly prohibited.
And so this lawsuit in Wyoming, what's the timeline for that? What are the next steps?
So I'm actually not familiar with what the timeline is, but what I can tell you is that in part of the lawsuit includes the hemp industry is asking the court for an injunction on this ban of Delta 8 products. So in other words, an injunction would put the ban on Delta 8 on hold, allowing hemp stores to continue selling Delta 8 products until the court comes out with the final decision on whether or not the ban is constitutional according to the state's constitution.
Thank you, Hannah, for filling us in on that. Now, before we get into what I learned from the folks at Habitat for Humanity, I will say be sure to stick around until the end for a conversation with Taylor as we share our music opinions and hot takes about the CFD nights this year. Emily Glenn and Scott Patrick live together in a trailer, along with 3 kids. The kids don't have a lot of room to run around inside the house, and Scott said that it's not the safest place for them to run around outside either. Their oldest, Willow, has autism. They said that she often has to spend time away from them and instead with her grandparents because the small space that they live in can just be overwhelming. But by the end of the year, they hope that will be different. Last year, their application for a home from Habitat for Humanity was approved, and groundwork began at the site in Cheyenne last summer. Emily says that the 3-bed, 2-bath home will be a big upgrade from their trailer, which just doesn't have enough space anymore.
Well, we've put so much time and money into that place, and there's still so much work that needs to be done, and ultimately we would be just outnumbered. Right now, all 3 of the kids share a bedroom, and the second bedroom is used for storage because there's not really anything else. So we've been sleeping on the couch for the last couple of years. Yeah. Man, it's going to be incredibly life-changing.
When we arrived at the construction site, there was a concrete truck spinning outside the house as workers were preparing to lay what will be the front porch of the new house. Inside the structure, most of the work was already done. They had just completed the texturing on the walls, and Scott and Emily can now start thinking about what colors they want to paint the walls. In the corner, Tamara Sanchez painted the edges of a windowsill. She, along with her 4 children, will be Scott and Emily's neighbors. The construction crew is simultaneously working on the house next door, which is set to be complete in the fall, just after Scott and Emily's. Tamara's kids are aged 3, 7, 13, and 15. Although they aren't old enough to help with the construction on their new home, she said that they like to drive by and look at the progress of the house. In addition to working a full-time job and raising 4 children as a single mother, Tamara, and any other community member receiving a home from Habitat, must work a set number of hours, called sweat equity, on building their home or for Habitat for Humanity's other projects.
It's been a journey. It's definitely a blessing. I am one that believes in good karma, so I try to pay for it as much. So I kind of feel like this was my blessing, just because, didn't have a good life growing up, didn't have the stability. So I'm just trying to do better for my kids and give them what I didn't have.
Scott and Emily and Tamara all had to work to get to where they are now. They completed an application process, which included interviews, proof of stable employment to show that they can pay off a mortgage, letters of recommendation from their community, and a 12-week financial literacy course through the local nonprofit My Front Door. They also must contribute sweat equity, typically between 200 and 400 hours per person, before move-in day. People like Scott and Emily and Tamara didn't get to a position to have a house with a fixed 0% interest mortgage because they were lucky. They worked for it. It wasn't just given to them. However, there are still many who struggle to afford housing for their families, and Habitat just doesn't have enough resources to support all of them. Earlier this month, the median listing price for homes in Laramie County was $435,000, according to Realtor.com. The Cheyenne Housing Authority allows community members to apply for affordable subsidized housing. As of December 2023, in Cheyenne, there were 850 people waiting for their turn in this program. For the Cheyenne Housing Authority itself, which serves communities across the state, not just in Cheyenne, it was around 2,200 people. Between the Cheyenne and Casper Housing Authorities, there were roughly 3,600 people waiting for affordable housing. For Dan Dorsch, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Laramie County, affordable housing means housing that serves those with an area median income ranging from 0 to 100%.
In the past, affordable housing has been looked at as people who are looking for a handout, people who don't go to work. That's been the typical mindset of what affordable housing means when people hear that term, but it's not. It's people like our homeowners that you've heard. They're hardworking families who are just struggling because the cost of housing is so high right now. And when the cost of housing is so high, it impacts other things like food insecurity, domestic violence, all kinds of issues, homelessness, right? It's all related to how high our housing costs are.
Here, Dorsch begins to touch on the theory of housing first. This is the philosophy that housing should be the top priority and first step towards meeting basic needs. Dorsch said this goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where housing and shelter is at the very bottom, the baseline to all other aspects of life.
Where we come in is we offer those opportunities for home ownership that aren't available through a traditional mortgage for people from 30 to 60% of the area median income. So by providing that home ownership opportunity to those folks, we're giving them a place to live, we're giving them a safe, affordable home, and that allows other opportunities from that affordable mortgage that they wouldn't otherwise have. When you look at the studies and the numbers of the impact of home ownership, better grades in school, better secondary education opportunities, it allows families to save money. Home equity is the number one way to build wealth in our country, and we're not providing enough of those opportunities for that upward mobility, which is an economic development, because then you have people invested in the communities they work in, they are paying property taxes, they're spending their funds where they live instead of commuting 45 minutes away. Our workforce can't afford to live where they work.
Scott and Emily are excited about their new home. They're looking forward to the opportunities that will come from having a safe and stable home for them and for their kids.
When we first were notified that we got selected, they asked each of the kids what they're most excited about. Our daughter, of course, she's most excited about having her own room, her own space. Our middle child, Tuesday, he's very excited about having 2 bathrooms. I think we all are. And then our youngest, he's excited about having stairs. I don't know why, but we should have a step or two.
Scott told me he was inspired to apply whenever he heard how much Habitat had helped one of his friends who went through the same program.
And I was talking to him about it a lot, and he was talking about how he had to put a lot of work into it, volunteer, be involved, and it's to get them out of the hole that they were in, to get them to move forward in life and be able to progress and do better things instead of being just stuck in a hole with really nothing progressing, nothing getting ahead. And I've talked to him here and there since he's gotten into his new house, and he's got a better job, he's got a newer car and stuff. It's just like this opportunity just gives us more hope to be able to succeed. It makes me feel like I can actually do something instead of taking a few steps forward to just take a few steps back and not feel like I got anywhere. We're not getting anywhere right now, but this right here has just got my hopes and my future and just everything just kind of planned out on how we're going to do things. Before, we're like, okay, we got an idea, and we're not even like trying to stick with it because it's garbage, really. It's not a place that we need to live, and we want to try to polish it and make it a good enough thing, but in the end, it's not.
But the housing crisis won't and can't be solved by Habitat for Humanity alone. Dorsch said it would take community support and government intervention to make any adequate change toward a more accessible housing market. On the city level, Cheyenne City Council has been rolling out zoning changes and updates to the city's development code, with the hope it makes development cheaper and incentivizes developers to come to Cheyenne. This includes things like removing minimum lot sizes to allow for more dense developments, removing density requirements to reduce the size of apartment rooms, which allow more units in an apartment building, and reducing parking space requirements. Some variation of all of these amendments to the development code were approved by the City Council in December. And while these changes may be a step in the right direction, Dorsch says that there is one solution that would lead to much more meaningful change.
Me personally, as someone who's been involved in housing advocacy, the zoning is good. Some of the other stuff the state is talking about are going to help, but what really needs to happen to really move the needle to help more affordable housing be built is going to be funding. And funding from the state and funding from a local government. And there are different mechanisms on how to make that work. We just got to get the elected officials to say, oh, you know what, housing is going to make my community better, and so we're going to invest in it. And that's really what it is an investment in our community and our future.
Nationally, there's little anyone can do about interest rates, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing that can be done other than wait.
Yeah, housing's not going to be a short-term fix. It's going to be a long-term issue, and it's been an issue for the last 20 years. It's just now we're starting to really feel it here in Wyoming, but there's communities across the nation have been dealing with housing and struggling with it for the last 30 years. So it's not a new problem. It's just kind of been brought to the forefront here in Wyoming. And for our state to move forward and to be an economically viable community for the people who want to live here, we need more housing.
Hello, I'm Taylor Staples, the new arts and entertainment reporter. So I kind of wanted to talk about Cheyenne Frontier Nights and the lineup they got this week and your guys' thoughts on the lineup and also who your dream lineup would be. So I can totally sum up all the artists. Would you guys want me to go run through? Okay. Turnpike Troubadours with Red Clay Strays. Then it's Jason Aldean and Chase Matthews. Then it's Jelly Roll and Warren Zeters. Then it's Machine Gun Kelly and Shabuzi. Then it's T-Pain and Ludacris. Then Lainey Wilson and Flatland Cavalry. And then last night is Thomas Rhett and Dylan Scott. So that's the lineup. I want to know your thoughts because I kind of like the mixture they have. I like that they have country. I like that they even have like pop country. Like Thomas Rhett really walks that line of more so pop than country. But Machine Gun Kelly and Jelly Roll are pretty out there, in my opinion.
I want to talk about Jelly Roll because I also think that he's a really interesting choice for this year, but he also was, I believe he won Best New Country Artist at the CMAs. And so I think from being here last year for Cheyenne Frontier Days and seeing like Zach Bryan come through, I think it's really interesting to see what new country or like quote unquote new country artists come through this town. Because they don't always come back. Like Cheyenne Frontier Nights is this huge musical moment for Cheyenne, whereas like the rest of the year, it is a lot more country artists, more local artists, even arguably like smaller artists, if you will, or artists that have just stayed more to those country roots. So I kind of love that Jelly Roll is coming through because like it might feel a bit odd, but he really does, even though his name is like not a standard country name, his music itself I think is really like creating a different scene in country. So I think that part's really cool to see.
I hope this doesn't get me kicked out of Wyoming, but I don't listen to country music at all. But I've definitely embraced the culture here since I moved here in late August last fall. I'm actually really not familiar with a lot of these artists. Like, I recognize a lot of these names. Like, I recognize T-Pain and Ludacris. I recognize Thomas Rhett and MGK. But I might live under a rock when it comes to pop music. There's not a lot I can contribute here.
I think there's some good acts. I'm excited about it. I think I'm most excited for T-Pain and Ludacris just because I think they would put on a fun show. But Turnpike Troubadours also have grown a lot in the past few years, and I think it's exciting that they've got them here. I'm not sure who I would have in my ideal lineup.
I can start with mine. Yes. Post Malone, I know he came a few years ago. I would definitely want him back, especially, I think he's going to come back, especially now that he's leaning more country, unfortunately. But still, I think he'd be perfect for it. And then Noah Kahan, I think would be great. That's cliche, but he fits the folksy vibe. And then I feel like for some throw-ins, so they were going to do Cardi B in 2020 before it got canceled. I feel like Cardi B could be fun. Or Eminem. Or Macklemore, he should come back. Where did he go?
Did he play at CFD at some point?
Macklemore? I don't think so.
Oh, okay, so he should just come back to the scene in general.
He should come back to the scene. What happened to him after Thrift Shop? You know what I'm saying? And then Kesha would be fun for like a throw-in. And then Blake Shelton, because he's probably the only like super country artist that I love, which is he's so mainstream. So that's a very basic thing of me to say, but I don't know. Blake Shelton has also been at CFD at Frontier Park maybe 2 or 3 times before. So he's been here a lot.
Some like country artists I like right now that I think would fit in. Maybe I really like Colter Wall right now. I think he would be great to perform here. Tyler Childers, of course, he's huge. And I really like Sierra Farrell. She put out a really nice album this year, and I think that would be incredible if they booked her at some point. So those are some names that would be on my ideal lineup, I guess.
I think that Hannah brought up an interesting point about like not being into country music, and that this is kind of one of the few times in a year where, weirdly enough, even though it's a rodeo, even though it's Cheyenne Frontier Nights, we do have people come through like Ludacris and T-Pain who are definitely not country music at all. And so honestly, I think in my like ideal lineup, love the idea of Sierra Farrell, love the idea of having like Blake Shelton or like those more classic country artists come through. I also think it would be kind of cool to pull in someone from outside of rap and country, which tend to be like the two types of artists that come through here. I'm coming up from Colorado, which has a bit of a bigger variety in music artists that come through, and I think it'd be really kind of cool to just expand the genres. I don't know what artists would be worth expanding the genre for Cheyenne, but I think it'd be cool to like bring in artists that are outside of that.
I mean, going off of that, country and rap, great popular genres, unfortunately not ones that I listen to on the daily basis. But I think, we have some artists, and I don't know, maybe they're a little bit slower, maybe this is who I am, but, artists like Lord Huron or Vampire Weekend or Noah Kahan, I don't know. Like, I think those would be, like, I'm basically just listing all of the artists that are performing at Red Rock Amphitheater this summer. But I think those would be some cool concerts. I might be the only one there. I'm sure there are other people who would,
Yeah, like Camp and Lord Huron would probably do great.
Yeah,
Like,
I think they would be amazing.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like Vampire Weekend? I think that would be a bop.
We could like draw out the 30-year-olds in Cheyenne.
I'm just calling out my generation. This is for all the millennials out there.
Again, we do want to say thank you for tuning in to the first episode of The Perch from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. This conversation we had about housing today is so huge and can't be addressed in just one episode of a podcast, of course. You're just scratching the surface. So be sure to check back every week with new episodes as we share continued conversations about housing and other important community issues. We'll be uploading new episodes every Wednesday, so be sure to check in then wherever you get your podcasts. And as this is a new podcast, we're open to change and feedback, so feel free to let us know what you think or what you want us to cover. You can send us an email at newsroom@wyomingnews.com. And check back next week where we'll be talking rodeo as the Daddy of Mall kicks off this week. So come say hi if you see one of us walking around with a microphone at Frontier Park or at the parade this weekend. But that's all for now. Thanks for listening. See you next week.